She walked onto the most elite military training base in America wearing old sneakers and a wrinkled shirt. The rich kids in designer tactical gear laughed at her, poured water on her shoes, and filmed her humiliation for social media. They thought she was nobody, just some lost tourist who didn't belong. But when their million-dollar training exercise turned into complete chaos and lives were on the line, this quiet woman stepped forward and did something that left everyone speechless. What happened next will change how you think about judging people forever. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Walsh had been out of uniform for 3 years. After serving 2 tours in Afghanistan and leading some of the most dangerous rescue missions in military history, she'd walked away from everything. The nightmares, the pressure, the weight of making life-and-death decisions every single day had finally broken her down. She'd handed in her resignation, moved to a small town, and tried to build a normal life. Today she was visiting Camp Thunder Ridge with her boyfriend Mike, a civilian contractor who wanted to show her around the base where he worked. Jessica had reluctantly agreed, knowing that stepping foot on a military installation again would bring back memories she'd spent years trying to forget. Camp Thunder Ridge wasn't just any base. It was where the children of senators, generals, and billionaires came to play soldier. Everything was shiny, expensive, and designed to impress. The cadets wore gear that cost more than most people's annual salary. Their rifles had custom engravings. Their boots were made from imported leather. This was where connections were made and legacies were built, not where real soldiers were trained. Jessica walked through the gates wearing canvas sneakers that had seen better days, jeans with a small hole in the knee and a simple t-shirt. She carried only a small backpack and moved with quiet confidence, her eyes automatically scanning the compound out of old habit. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was just trying to get through the day without having a panic attack. The mockery started immediately. A group of cadets lounging near an expensive Humvee spotted her first. One of them, a young man with perfectly styled hair and sunglasses that probably cost more than Jessica's car payment, nudged his friends and pointed. "Look at this," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did someone's cleaning lady get lost?" The laughter was immediate and cruel. A girl in a designer tactical vest whispered to her group, "She's not even wearing proper shoes. What's she doing here?" Jessica kept walking, her expression calm and neutral. She'd heard worse things in actual combat zones. A few privileged teenagers making jokes wasn't going to ruin her day. But they weren't finished. As Jessica stopped to wait for Mike near the training area, more cadets gathered. They saw an easy target, someone who clearly didn't belong in their world of privilege and connections. A tall girl with perfectly braided hair approached, her boots clicking against the concrete. This was Madison Pierce, daughter of a 4-star general and someone who'd never faced a real challenge in her life. She was used to people stepping aside for her, used to being the most important person in any room. "Excuse me," Madison said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "This is a restricted military training area. Are you lost?" Jessica looked at her calmly. "I'm waiting for someone." "Well, you can't wait here. This area is for authorized personnel only." Jessica didn't argue or explain herself. She simply nodded and started to move toward the visitor area. But Madison wasn't done showing off for her friends. "Wait," Madison called out, grabbing a water bottle from a nearby bench. "I think you need this more than I do." She tipped the bottle over Jessica's shoes, soaking the canvas completely. The crowd erupted in laughter. Someone started filming with their phone. Another cadet tossed a fake grenade prop at Jessica's feet and yelled, "Incoming! Civilian down." Jessica stood there in her soaked shoes, water dripping onto the concrete, and said nothing. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline. It was the kind of control that comes from facing real danger, real pressure, real consequences. But to the cadets, her silence looked like defeat. "That's what happens when you don't belong," Madison announced to the cheering crowd. "Security should escort her out before she embarrasses herself more." An instructor approached, having heard the commotion. He looked at Jessica's civilian clothes, her wet shoes, and the circle of laughing cadets, and made the obvious assumption. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move to the designated visitor area," he said firmly. "This section is for active personnel only." Jessica nodded quietly and began walking toward the exit, her wet shoes leaving dark prints on the ground behind her. The cadets cheered like they'd won some kind of victory. Madison waved mockingly and called out, "Thanks for visiting. Please leave us a 5-star review." But as Jessica walked away, a few people noticed something strange about her composure. The way she moved. The way she'd absorbed all that humiliation without flinching, without defending herself, without even looking surprised. Who reacts to public mockery with that kind of calm? 2 hours later, the alarm sirens started wailing across the base. Scenario Alpha is now active, the loudspeakers announced. All units report to the simulation zone. This is a live training exercise. Repeat, this is not a drill. The cadets scrambled to their positions, grabbing expensive equipment and checking their custom gear. This was their moment to shine, their chance to prove they belonged at the most elite training facility in the country. The scenario was complex. A search and rescue mission in hostile territory, complete with simulated enemy forces, electronic warfare and multiple casualties to extract. Each team had sophisticated equipment, detailed maps, and months of training behind them. Madison Pierce was assigned as mission commander, a role she'd lobbied for aggressively. She stood in the command center, surrounded by screens and communications equipment that cost more than most people's houses. Teams Alpha and Bravo, move to grid reference 347, she ordered into her headset. Charlie Team, establish overwatch on the ridge. Delta Team, prepare for casualty extraction. For the first 10 minutes, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The teams moved out with military precision, their expensive radios crackling with professional-sounding chatter. Then everything fell apart. Team Alpha took a wrong turn and ended up in a dead-end canyon. Team Bravo walked straight into a simulated ambush and panicked, breaking formation and scattering. Charlie Team got lost trying to find the ridge and went completely off the grid. Delta Team's equipment malfunctioned, leaving them without communication or navigation. Madison's voice became increasingly frantic as she tried to coordinate the chaos. Alpha Team, what's your position? Bravo Team, report. Does anyone have visual on Charlie Team? The expensive radios were full of static and confused voices. Teams were calling for help, reporting injuries, requesting extraction, and generally proving that all their privilege and equipment meant nothing when things went wrong. In the observation area, Jessica watched the disaster unfold on the tactical displays. She could see exactly what was happening, where each team was, what mistakes they were making. Her trained eyes spotted the problems immediately. Poor communication, inadequate planning, no contingency procedures, and leadership that crumbled under pressure. But it wasn't her problem. She was just a visitor, remember? Just some lost civilian who didn't belong. Then one of the teams made a critical error that put lives in real danger. Team Bravo, trying to escape the simulated ambush, had taken shelter in an old building that wasn't part of the approved training area. The structure was unstable, and as they moved inside, part of the roof collapsed, trapping 2 cadets under heavy debris. Suddenly the exercise wasn't a game anymore. Real injuries, real danger, real consequences. Medical emergency in Sector 7, someone shouted over the radio. We need immediate assistance. 2 personnel trapped, possible serious injuries. Madison stared at the tactical display, her face pale with panic. She trained for simulated emergencies, not real ones. The weight of actual responsibility was crushing her. Dispatch medical team to Sector 7, she stammered. All teams, maintain positions and... Ma'am, her communications officer interrupted. Medical team can't reach Sector 7. The access road is blocked by the collapsed building debris. Madison's hands shook as she reached for the radio. She'd never faced a real crisis before, never had to make decisions when lives actually depended on her. All her training, all her expensive equipment, all her family connections meant nothing now. That's when Jessica stepped forward. She'd been standing quietly in the back of the command center, forgotten by everyone. But when she heard the panic in Madison's voice, when she saw the chaos on the tactical displays, her training kicked in. Team Charlie, this is command, Jessica said, her voice cutting through the static with absolute authority. Break off your current mission and proceed immediately to grid reference 352. You're now the primary rescue team. Madison spun around, confused. Who said that? You can't just... Jessica ignored her and continued speaking into the radio with calm precision. Team Delta, I need you to establish a landing zone for medical evacuation at coordinates 348 to 219. Clear any debris, mark the area with signal flares. This is Team Charlie, came the confused response. We're receiving conflicting orders. Who is this? This is Lieutenant Colonel Walsh, Jessica said simply. Follow my instructions immediately. The effect was immediate. Jessica's voice carried an authority that couldn't be faked, a competence that came from years of real experience. The team stopped arguing and started moving. Over the next 30 minutes, Jessica orchestrated a perfect rescue operation. She coordinated air support, directed ground teams around obstacles, managed medical evacuation, and maintained constant communication with all units. Her commands were precise, efficient, and exactly what each situation required. The trapped cadets were rescued with minor injuries. The scattered teams were reunited and accounted for. What had been a complete disaster became a textbook example of crisis management. As the all-clear signal sounded across the base, the command center fell silent. Everyone was staring at the woman in canvas shoes who had just saved the entire exercise. Madison found her voice first. You're not authorized to give commands. You're not even military personnel. Jessica looked at her calmly. Actually, I served 10 years in special operations. I led rescue missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. I resigned 3 years ago with the rank of lieutenant colonel. The silence stretched longer. I didn't come here to take command, Jessica continued. I came to visit my boyfriend. But when your operation fell apart and people were in danger, I did what I was trained to do. Before anyone could respond, they heard the sound of helicopters approaching. Through the windows of the command center, they could see 3 military aircraft landing on the base's main helipad. From the lead helicopter stepped a man whose presence commanded immediate attention. 4 stars gleamed on his collar, and every step he took radiated absolute authority. This was General Robert Hayes, commander of the entire Regional Training Command. General Hayes walked straight to the command center, his expression unreadable. Behind him came 2 colonels and a small team of military investigators. The room fell silent as the general entered. Every cadet stood at attention, their faces pale with worry. Madison tried to shrink into the background, but there was nowhere to hide. General Hayes surveyed the room slowly, his gaze finally settling on Jessica, who was standing quietly near the back. Lieutenant Colonel Walsh, he said formally. Jessica straightened but didn't salute. She was no longer in the military, no longer bound by those protocols. General Hayes. I received multiple reports about an incident at this facility, the general said, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. Reports of harassment, public humiliation, and disrespect directed at a decorated veteran. He paused, letting his words sink in. Reports about cadets mocking someone who served our country with distinction, someone who saved lives in combat zones while they were still in high school. Madison's face went white. Several other cadets looked like they wanted to disappear. But I also received reports, General Hayes continued, about an unauthorized person taking command of a training exercise and executing a flawless rescue operation when properly trained personnel failed to respond adequately. He looked directly at Jessica. Would you care to explain what happened here today, Colonel Walsh? Jessica's voice was steady and professional. I observed a training exercise that deteriorated into a real emergency. When the designated commanders were unable to respond effectively, I provided tactical guidance to ensure the safety of the personnel involved. Without authorization. Without being asked. Without any obligation to intervene. That's correct, sir. General Hayes nodded slowly. And why did you do that? For the first time, Jessica's composure cracked slightly. Because soldiers were in danger, sir. And when soldiers are in danger, rank and authorization become secondary to getting them home safely. The general walked over to Madison, who was trying to make herself invisible behind a computer terminal. Cadet Pierce, he said firmly. Step forward. Madison reluctantly moved to the center of the room, her perfectly styled appearance now disheveled with stress and shame. You were the mission commander for today's exercise. What happened? Madison's voice was barely audible. The situation became complicated, sir. Multiple system failures, communication breakdowns. I'm not asking about equipment failures, Cadet. I'm asking about leadership failures. Your failures. Madison couldn't meet his gaze. I lost control of the situation, sir. You lost control because you've never faced a real challenge in your life, General Hayes said bluntly. Your position here is based on family connections, not competence. When things went wrong, you proved you have no business leading anyone. He turned to address the entire room. This facility is supposed to train future military leaders. Instead, it's become a playground for privileged children who think rank is inherited and respect is automatic. The general's gaze swept across the scared faces of the cadets. You mocked a woman who has more combat experience than this entire facility combined. You humiliated someone who risked her life for this country while you were safe in your private schools. He looked back at Jessica. Colonel Walsh, the Army would welcome you back. Your country needs leaders like you. Jessica shook her head gently. Thank you, sir, but I'm done with war. I came here today just to support my boyfriend. I never intended to get involved. Yet when it mattered, you did get involved. Because that's what real soldiers do. They serve even when no one asks them to. General Hayes turned to the cadets one final time. Miss Pierce, your expulsion from this program is effective immediately. Anyone else involved in today's harassment will face disciplinary action. This facility will undergo a complete review of its admission standards and training protocols. As the general prepared to leave, he paused next to Jessica. For what it's worth, Colonel, you handled today exactly the way a leader should. With competence, not ceremony. Jessica nodded once. Thank you, sir. After the general and his team departed, the command center remained silent for a long time. The cadets who had mocked Jessica couldn't look at her. The instructors who had dismissed her seemed embarrassed by their assumptions. Finally, a young cadet approached hesitantly. Unlike the others, he hadn't participated in the earlier harassment. He'd watched the whole thing with growing discomfort. Ma'am, he said quietly, I wanted to apologize. Not everyone here agreed with what happened to you. Jessica looked at him, really looked. She saw something in his eyes that reminded her of the soldiers she used to command. What's your name, son? Private Williams, ma'am. I'm here on a merit scholarship. There are good people here, Private Williams. Don't let today's events make you think otherwise. But remember, real leadership isn't about the loudest voice or the most expensive equipment. It's about being ready to serve when you're needed most. A few other cadets gathered around, asking quiet questions about service, about leadership, about what it really meant to be a soldier. Jessica answered each question thoughtfully, her voice patient but authoritative. As the sun set over Camp Thunder Ridge, Jessica finally prepared to leave. She'd come as a visitor and somehow ended up teaching lessons about honor, service, and leadership that would be remembered long after she was gone. Mike found her by the exit gate, having heard about the day's events from multiple sources. Ready to go home? He asked. Jessica looked back at the base one more time. Ready, she said simply. As they drove away, Jessica reflected on the strange twists life could take. She'd left the military to escape responsibility and pressure, but when the moment came, her training and values wouldn't let her stand aside. Maybe that was the real lesson of the day. You can take the soldier out of the service, but you can't take the service out of the soldier. A week later, Jessica received a letter from the Department of Defense. They were offering her a teaching position at the Army's Command and Staff College, training the next generation of military leaders. She read the letter twice, then set it aside to think about. Outside her window, the mountains stretched toward the horizon, peaceful and quiet. She'd found the normal life she thought she wanted. But deep down, she knew that some people were meant to serve in different ways. The young cadets at Camp Thunder Ridge would need teachers who understood what real leadership looked like. Teachers who could show them that strength comes from character, not connections. Teachers who knew the difference between playing soldier and being one. Jessica picked up the letter and read it one more time. Then she reached for her phone to call the number at the bottom of the page. Maybe it was time to serve again, just in a different way. If this story inspired you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to remember that appearances can be deceiving and real strength doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person everyone needs most.